I am thrilled and honored to introduce to you my friend, my good friend, and author of his second book, Saving to Prosperity, the talented Kevin O'Brien.
Kevin will be presenting a short PowerPoint presentation. He told me this is going to be half an hour.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you. Welcome. How's everybody tonight? Good, good. I want to thank you for coming. It means a lot to me. For those that know me well, know that financial planning is my passion. And for those of you that don't know me well, financial planning is my passion. So anytime that people ask me what I do, I always say I'm a financial planner, because I like doing the math and all the, problem solving and having fun that way. The other stuff is fun to do, but the passion is really in the financial planning part. So I was really fortunate. Over 30 years ago, I was able to take what I like to do as a passion, and I found a way of making a living doing it. And so, in a way, I've been very blessed, and I have all of you to thank for that. I've actually never gone to work a day in my life except when I was at the FASCO. And the rest of the time, I've just been playing, guys. That's all there is to it. I'm having fun. So, and I found that was the best way to get going. So, anyways, we've got a lot of stuff to do today. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So let's get started. So, what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about millennials. Now, millennials, we look at them and they're our kids, and we don't realize it's the largest demographic in history. We always talk about the baby boomers, but the millennials already outnumber us. And they're going to have a huge effect on everything and anything, all right? That hasn't gone unnoticed, especially with the larger financial services industry. They've kind of jumped on this, and you're going to be seeing a little bit of examples on that as we go through. But there's other things that are happening too. And it's our generation's problem that we didn't teach these kids, we call them kids, but they're adults now, the basics of financial responsibility. And it's really going to affect their success rate down the road. And one of the problems we're finding is they don't know how to set goals. Goals have a tendency to have a length of time. They want it now. They want it all now. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about setting goals effectively. We're going to talk about how we measure our progress. I'm going to do a little thing called lies and GPS. It came to me one day. I stuck with it. I kind of like it. So I'll show you how that works. And then I'm going to talk to you about why you need help. And then the best thing I can do for you is go through a case study. And so I've got actually a millennial couple that I picked out. We're going to go through and see what they're doing. And we're going to look at, paying off debt, student debt, down payment for a house, children. Most of my kids, my kids I think do realize that the average child costs $100,000 between 0 and 19 years of age, because I remind them of that every day. Okay? So, and we're talking about education, paying for the education. Now, I think we're lucky in Canada because I was just down in St. Louis. Average education for a child in the States is like $150,000. Like they actually have an investment program that's way bigger than what ours is to kind of put that together. We're going to talk about taking trips, retirement, and the other thing we're going to talk about is Plan B. Now, we're going to talk about Plan B, and I'm going to explain to you why you need a Plan B. And then I'm going to go through a thing called, what I call, anyways, the 10-cent solution. And literally, 10 cents is all you need to do. So that's what we're going to do. All right? So, there are three main drivers that are happening right now. Computers. I can remember the first day that they gave me a computer at the Pasco. Do you remember that? And it sat on our desk and it didn't have any software. It was a great thing to make shadow puppets on. That was about it. So, and the internet. I can remember our office on Upper James there. We were the first building in Ontario to have the internet. And the hub they put up into the ceiling tiles. And it cost me an arm and a leg to have it, but we needed it for, at that time, the dealership that was in Kitchener. And I can remember sitting there waiting for 40, 50, 60, 80 seconds for a page to open on the internet. Today, it's a fraction of a second before somebody moves on to something else. And that's where digital data comes in. Digital data is a blessing and a curse. And you would not believe how much data is being collected from about every individual every day without you knowing anything about it. Just going through a shopping mall today with your charge card in your pocket, they know exactly what stores you've been into and what you stopped and looked at. That's scary. So, okay, so digital kind of changes everything, okay? So, we're going to talk about what is a millennial. It's kind of funny, but there's no set age. It's kind of a range. And it kind of blends in a little bit, but anybody born between 1981 to 1996. So you're between 22 and almost 40 years of age, and you're coming into your prime time. It's the largest demographic in history, bigger than the boomers. It's going to have a huge impact on the financial services industry. It's going to have a huge impact on social services. It's going to be disruptive all the way. And the biggest problem we're having is there's a lack of understanding of the basics of financial planning. It's not being taught in schools. It's not being taught in home. So where they are getting their information is off this stupid thing we call a phone. So and the other thing that happens too is the phone doesn't tell you how to budget. It tells you how to spend. The phone doesn't tell you how to save money. It tells you how to finance. So the biggest problem I'm seeing is there's a lot of phony wealth. I walk around my own neighborhood. I can tell you that almost 95% of the cars in my neighborhood, which are BMWs and Cadillacs and top end, are leased. There's no ownership. I'm the only idiot on my block that owns my own cars. But I buy good cars. And they stay for a long time. So, we're also going to talk about how this lack of knowledge and this constantly being put off base. And I'll tell you why, because this digital age is interrupting their thought pattern. And so they're constantly be putting off. It's like chasing a rabbit or a squirrel or a shiny object. And so what's happening is the millennials are actually delaying home ownership, marriage, and children. And so we're going to try to help that. We're going to try to make that happen for them. Now, I'm happy to say that my kids are doing their part. So, I got my first grandchild coming next year. So, all right, so what's the difference between a want and a need? And this is an important and powerful tool and a powerful lesson. A want is a product or a service that is not a necessity. Okay? And a necessity is something that you purchase that you need to survive. It's going to contribute to your ability to live or earn a living. A need is an item that you require. You need it to live, breathe. It's something to keep you alive, okay? Now, some of this gets a little bit gray. So, for example, eating would be a necessity. However, eating at a restaurant every night would kind of be a luxury, wouldn't it? So you can either do groceries or go out every night to fast food. Transportation. We talked about cars. But you know, transportation could be public transportation, taking the bus. Or owning a vehicle. Most people, though, borrow their vehicle. I don't know why. So anyways, the key here is it's cash flow and net worth driven, and that's disappeared in the monologue that we talk about as financial service, and we need to bring that back, the basics. And there's only one way, or two ways, sorry, to improve your cash flow. You either make more money or you spend less money. No magic. That's it. And it works. So we're going to talk about the lives theory now. So the lives theory is L stands for life, I is income, E is expenses, and S is savings. So with your cash flow, we're going to describe 3 different formulas to explain that to you. So if life is equal to income minus your expenses plus debt, you're going backwards. You're digging a hole. And unfortunately, that's the majority of the millennials. The other one that's kind of dangerous is when life is equal to income minus expenses. In other words, whatever's coming in the household is gone by the end of the month. So, now there are a lot of millennials that actually know how to save money. They're really good savers. So life is equal to income minus expenses equals savings. But here's where they fall down. There's no plan for the savings. So they might get an accumulation growing for a little while, and then that shiny purse comes along. Or the phone tells them that there's a new model of Apple phone and trade in that $1,000 phone for a $1,500 phone this week. We got a special on. You only have to pay for it for 6 years now instead of 3. And that's what's happening is money that's being saved isn't being put to a plan. It doesn't have a purpose. And so I brought out a thing to change that. So very few people amass a fortune, even though they might have a positive cash flow, because they're not putting it into separate savings. So if you lack the ability to make a long-term goal, it ain't going to happen. You can't maintain the focus and the effort. The average person today is hit with 4 million pieces of advertising a day. A day. Your brain is almost getting fried with all this stuff. And it's the packages, it's the car emblems, it's the signs on the side of the road. It's all branding, and it's all being shot at you at the speed of light digitally, okay? And your mind is just all over with it. So in order to do it, we have to achieve goals. We simply can't say that we want to. We have to make it happen. So studies have shown that with the digital age, there's a constant interruption. Almost like, remember when we used to, as kids, we used to play with flashcards? It's that kind of thought process that's happening today, not focused or problem solving. It's actually rewiring our brains. This is scary stuff because it hasn't escaped the marketing departments, and they're using it for their own purpose. There was an article today I read about the certain federal government in Canada. Last election spent $10 million influencing the vote on Facebook. And it's literally, they can word an article that forms your opinion now. And that's where we're getting all this interference with elections and stuff, and it's kind of scary that that can happen. So there's no really quick fix for this. It's going to be a process. So over Christmas time last year, I actually got one of those Google Homes from one of the companies I deal with as my Christmas present. I'm happy to say that it managed to make it to the garbage can before I took the wrapper off. I can also tell you that Steffi and I had a situation happen with Netflix that scared the crap out of us. We had the power go off and I said something. It was a 4-letter word. When the power came back on, Netflix was searching for a movie with that in its title. That's kind of weird, right? So that's what was happening. So the key is we've got to fix this. There's no quick fix. And we're going to change the way people think. And the way to do that is to have a plan. So, and it's got to be written down. And you got to want these savings to do things for you. You can't just let them sit there in case, okay? So what you do with your savings is going to make the biggest difference on whether you're going to be a prosperous person or someone that's got things, okay? So I'm going to talk about the GPS theory. I wonder where I got this from. I came up with it first. Yeah, kind of cool. Then all of a sudden they came up with those little boxes and says, well, how am I supposed to get my goals with that? So my first experience with GPS was the military. And unfortunately, they forgot about true north and magnetic north. And I was in the middle of the forest with a bunch of guys, and every 100 meters where we went one way, we were 30 meters off. We never found our destinations. That was what happened. That's back in the early 90s. So anyways, GPS. G is for goal. P is for priority, and S is for savings. You must have a financial plan that puts that all together for you and makes a purpose for these savings, because money without purpose disappears. And I hear bells. Am I having a stroke? So, we're going to talk about the smart way to do a goal. Some of you have heard of this before. Some, this is going to be brand new. But SMART means it's got to be specific to be a true goal. You can't be wishy-washy. You got to write it down. You got to love it. You got to make it work for you. You got to be able to feel it, touch it, taste it. It's got to be measurable. You can't have something like, I want to make a lot of money one day. Not going to work. You've got to literally put the number down. Surprisingly or not, there's some kind of a science with writing it down. It works. If you're a business owner, we all sit down and write our goals out for the year. It works. It has to be attainable. I mean, you could write down that you want to be, world domination or to be the richest man. It's not going to happen, right? I mean, it's got to be realistic too. Attainable means you got to put some effort into it. And it also has to be relevant. For example, I couldn't wish to be the president of the United States because you got to be born there, apparently. And it has to be time-bound. A goal has got to have a beginning and an end. Now, if you don't reach the goal by the time you reach the end, your only thing that you can change is the length of time. You just picked the wrong time zone. Just got to extend it. The goal has to stay exactly the same. Don't change the goal, change the time. All right? So, now, you have to almost be like Joseph in Technicolor when you're setting a goal. When Steffi and I were designing our house in Ancaster, we had pictures, we had drawings, we had books from different people that were supplying stuff, and we actually visualized how it was going to look. And so right in the middle of doing all this, we started making some changes. We widened the place, we took a room out, we did all this stuff. It was so powerful and interesting that 6 months later, I was able to walk into what I visualized in my head. It works. So you need to describe it. You got to describe it like with an Italian flavor to it. You got to be able to taste it, touch it, smell it, all that good stuff, okay? And it will work for you so more. Oh, it's amazing, especially with Stephanie's cooking. I can get into that really well with Stephanie's cooking. So, and you got to choose your words wisely. One of the things that I do, and I mean any of my clients here, if you come into my office and you say to me, let me see your goals for 2018, I can go over my credenza, open up the top thing, and they're all listed there. I have 50 goals every year that I must attain. If I didn't write them down, it wouldn't happen. The weird part is, I forget to look at the list until December. And I opened the thing up and it's like, oh, did that, did this, did that. Didn't know how I was going to do that when I wrote it down, but bang, did that, nailed it. It's kind of neat. So the other thing too is you have to set a time frame that's realistic, because if it doesn't have those outer edges, it's just a slogan, it's not a goal. It's powerful, powerful, powerful. Now, the other thing that happens is I call them strategic byproducts. And sometimes if you're not watching, they're going to come up and bite you in the rear end, but it's a good bite. It's a love bite, okay? So, saving money, there could be something that you have never imagined that will be a benefit to you from doing that. And so we're going to go through a case study later, and I'm going to show you an actual example of a strategic byproduct. But I have to tell you, whenever you set a goal, just make sure you put a note in there to look for them and go back and review it, because all of a sudden you'll see something, oh, that was a strategic byproduct. I didn't recognize that when it happened, but look what's all the benefit for it. So the other thing is you have to utilize this tool in all aspects of your life. You can set financial goals. You can set relationship goals. You could set goals for everything. And it's fun, because as you do it and you start getting better at it, the rewards just keep on coming in, and the strategic byproducts actually multiply the reward. It's so much fun. So, now, the problem we're seeing today is these things. Did I just knock off my mark? No. Worst invention ever happened. Best invention that ever happened. So you realize that this smartphone probably costs $1,000, probably has taken probably $150,000 worth of technology out of my pocket. So I don't have to carry a camera anymore, or a video camera. I don't have to carry a notebook, a phone, calculator. I got all that stuff right here. It's kind of neat. But it's a curse. And digital technology is becoming such a curse. I can't tell you how many times, especially in Stony or in Ancaster, people are walking around, and I got to tell you, when I'm in Ancaster walking around and there's traffic, I'm like this, okay? It's dangerous. I have seen people cross golf links without looking up from their phone. It is scary, all right? The fun part is when you see people walk into poles or into fountains. I've seen people fall into fountains. It's kind of fun to watch, but not good. So, but yeah, smartphones, the social media stuff and everything else, you gotta be able to turn it off. There's too much screen time. And what happens here is it's a constant interruption. It actually is reprogramming the millennial brains, and it's making it so they can't make goals. That's scary. It's actually rewiring us, okay? So, all right. So, now we're going to talk about the 10-cent solution. And this is something that I put together. It's in the book. I've done the math. It works. Okay? So, for every dollar coming into your household, 50 cents of that dollar goes for necessities. Putting the food, shelter, transportation, clothing, all that good stuff on the table. 35 cents is used for discretionary. That's going out to eat. That's going to buy that special purse, vacations, or entertainment, going to the movies. Okay? 5 cents should go to your emergency fund. And it's kind of, the emergency fund, we all say that's a great idea. Very few people do it. But I have to tell you, the clients of mine that have been able to do that and have come up against something that's been a major shift in their life, like losing a job or losing a spouse or getting sick, they turn around and say to me, wow, I'm glad you talked me into doing that. This saved my keister, all right? So, now, the last 10 cents, what are we going to do with that last 10 cents? Well, if we took that last 10 cents and put it into your GPS fund, that goals, priority, savings, like an RSP, let's put it that way. What happens then? Well, The taxes that you paid on that money off your paycheck are sent back to you March, April, with your tax return. Guess what that is? That's a strategic byproduct. I didn't see that coming, right? All of a sudden you get this nice check. Now, it's what you do with that check, though, that makes a big diff. If you took that income tax return and used it properly, now you magnify the benefit. Pay down some debt. Pay down your Christmas credit card. Put some money towards a longer-term goal, like a vacation or something. Or you can take your tax return, throw it on your mortgage annually, and pay a mortgage that was going to take 25 years to pay off and knock it down to 15 years. Who would like to be mortgage-free after 15 years of home ownership? Works. And it works for every tax bracket. It's kind of neat. All right? So, now, what happens? You've got your money, you got your savings, and they're all working extra hard for you. Or you could save for another GPS goal. Kids' education. Personally, I like saving for trips. Nothing nicer than to be able to come back from a trip and not have anything on your credit card. Some people want to have the cottage life, so they should maybe put it away for their cottage. Or a new set of King Cobras. I could go for that too, right? So there's, or a new car. Pay for your car rather than put it on a loan, or at least put a down payment on it. So studies have shown that millennials, Generation Y, and the late Generation X have had to delay 3 main goals, and they're all common. It was really interesting when we went through this, and the percentage of it is really high. They've delayed getting married, they delayed buying a house, and they delayed having children. Stephanie and I had our first one at 22. That 22-year-old, well, 22 years ago, is now 32. They're expecting their first one next year. He'll be almost 33. Is he 33? Probably be 34 almost. There. Boy, they grow up fast. So everything's being delayed. Stephanie was pregnant when we were, I don't know, you were 22? All right, I'll go with that. Just knock off a couple of years, and that's a good way to go. So that 10% is really good to be put away and start saving. And to buy a new house today, these kids are faced with a big mountain, and they're scared about it. And yeah, the government's made it a little bit harder with the new rules. Let's talk about that, and we're going to go through an actual home purchase for a young couple. So nowadays, there's this minimum down payment. There always has been a minimum down payment, but the banks were kind of playing a game. You could actually use a line of credit for your down payment, but it's still debt. Didn't make any sense. So people were actually buying houses with zero money down. Very dangerous, okay? But for the first $500,000 of the value of a new or used home, they have to have a certain percentage down, and it's 5% of the purchase price. So a $500,000 home, you need 25 grand before you walk into the bank. And a lot of these kids can't do that. Anything above a $500,000 and up to $1 million, you need another portion. So you need 10% of the value above a $500,000. So if you were looking at a house that was $600,000, you need 5% of the $500,000 and 10% of the $100,000 above that for the $600,000 value. Now, what do people need for $1 million home today? 20%. That's $200,000. If you live in Toronto, $1 million is normal. If you live in Ancaster, $1 million is normal nowadays. I can't believe it. We took a look at some houses with my kids, and I was shocked at the prices that they were asking, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Like, wow, I can't believe this. However, I forget, when Stephanie and I first looked at our first house, we were looking at 13% interest rates on a mortgage. All right, 13%. And you want to know something? That was a special offer because they were 20% at the bank. And we're heading that way if we continue to do the things we're doing. I'm talking about the government, not anybody else. So, if you're self-employed or you have a bad credit rating, they may not take your 20, 25% down. They may say to you, you need to have more down. Especially if you're self-employed and your income isn't, stabilized. They actually penalize you for that. So normally the minimum down payment must come from you, your own funds. It's better to do this, save for the down payment and minimize your debts. Now I'll explain a little bit there before we already moved on, but I'll just explain. I have seen parents, what do they call them? The butterfly, the hoovering parents? Helicopter. They do worse damage to this kid by giving them the down payment because the kid can't save anything. And they think that next time they need something, they just go back to the bank of mom and dad. It doesn't work that way. Not forever anyway. So, anyways, the government also put in a mortgage stress test. And I got to tell you, anytime they saw any life in the economy, they seem to put these rules in to kind of kill it. Housing sales for 2018 are down 16% from what they were a year ago. Now, does it mean that the banks aren't lending? No. It means that people are going to secondary lenders. It could be a problem down the road. I see that happening. Do anybody remember the home crisis we had in 2007 and 8 down in the States? Well, it could be the same type of thing with these less than prime mortgages that they're putting out there. But anyways, the government has it so that you have to pay 200 basis points above the mortgage rate that you qualify for, or you have to match the Bank of Canada's 5-year interest rate. Well, all it is making you have to put more and have an income to support that. So, $500,000 mortgage, $25,000 down is the minimum. $600,000 mortgage, $25,000 for the minimum plus 10, so $35,000. $750,000 house. Let's say you're going to Mississauga. Basically, you need $50,000 down. $1 million house in Toronto. You need $200,000 down. Can you imagine a young couple living in Toronto trying to get into their first home and it's $1 million? You couldn't do it. So, let's, for the fun of it, plan for the purchase of a house in this area. So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the truth about real estate too. How many people here think that real estate's a good investment? Guess what? There was an article that was done with the Globe and Mail. I can't call him a friend. He's an acquaintance of mine called Rob Carrick. So Rob Carrick put an article in, and I think it was 2015, and it was about a house that was bought in Barrie in the 1980s, and how it was a great investment because when these people sold it in 2015, they made a ton of money. And the numbers were in the Globe and Mail. And of course, like I say, I can't call him a friend. So I immediately emailed him. I have his email. And I called him an idiot. So he called me on the phone, which he does normally, quite a bit actually. And he says, "What are you talking about, O'Brien?" I said, "You just put the wrong thing in the paper." He says, "No, I didn't." I said, "You're showing it as almost a 6% rate of return. I'm going to prove to you you're wrong." He says, "Go ahead." I said, "So the house was owned for 25 years. Yep. Brand new. Yep. Did they have to put in a fence? Oh, yeah. And a driveway? Yeah. Air conditioning? Yep. Okay. And in 25 years, at least one furnace, at least replace all the windows, How many times for the roof? Probably twice. And that air conditioner they put in, they probably replaced that a couple of times too. He's like, oh. You could hear him on the phone like, oh crap, I never thought of that, right? Then I hit him with the big one. You got to also deduct the property taxes and the interest off the mortgage to make it comparable to an investment. And he says, holy mackerel, he says, they wouldn't have made anything. Actually, I said, Rob, I've actually calculated it out for you. I said, they made 3% over 25 years. Oh, he says, well, that's better than a GIC. And I said, you're right. That's better than a GIC in 2015. It's 7% lower than what a GIC was in 1985. You don't make any money on housing. But that's not discouraging you from buying a house. You need someplace to hang your hat. Not that I need a hat, but you need to have someplace to hang your hat. So buying a house is nice, but don't be fooled by that big check you get at the end of it because you've already spent it. Okay? So, we're going to go through an actual listing that I found. This home was listed for $599,900. That's how they list them. I don't know why they don't just say $600,000. It's in Hamilton, on the mountain, 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, about 1,200 square feet. So, you need a 5% down payment on that first $500,000, so we need $25,000 for this young couple. The second part of the down payment is 10% of the $100,000 over the $500,000 because it's a $600,000 house. So we need $35,000. Now you're talking to kids just coming into the work world. $35,000. How am I going to come up with that? Well, simple. You make it a goal, you make it a priority, and there's your savings. And they look at you like, okay, how's that work? I'll show you. So, they have a combined household income of $100,000. Not big, not small. It actually has dead center. So I was hitting a golf ball right down the center. Now, they have a time frame set up, 4 years. They want to be in that house in 4 years' time because they want to start a family within 5 years. Great. So we need a few bucks. So if I calculate it out, we needed $12,500 per year over 4 years, and they get paid every 2 weeks. That works out to about $580 every paycheck. Goes away. And so they're going to name that account, they're going to set up an account, and they're going to name it GPS Home Purchase. They're going to name it. Don't name it Charlie or Fluffy. Name it give it the name that you can identify what it is. And then start using that SMART. Put the time frame, make it realistic, it's attainable. Buy some books, take a look at pictures, get in love with it. You're going to be shocked at how fast it can happen. Be disciplined and stick to your plan and forget about the ads that come in on Rogers because that's actually Scotiabank that's doing that. So that's one way of doing it. But the title of the book is Saving to Prosperity. All I see is misery. I'm losing $12,500 a year, and I can't go out for dinner, and I can't do this, I can't do that. So let's make it fun, right? Why not? Instead of putting that away into that bank account, let's put it into an RSP. And while we're at it, instead of just putting it into an RSP, why don't we max out our RSP contributions for those 4 years? Let's really go and make that goal a priority. And yeah, you know what? You might have to use Netflix rather than go to a movie. Big deal. You can still have fun. We used to have, and we still do, card nights, right? I mean, we're old fogies, but we have card nights. So, we put that into an RSP, and all of a sudden we've got this strategic benefit happening here, okay? Because partner one of that $100,000 was bringing in $70,000 a year. So he's going to put $12,600, which is 18% of his income, into an RSP. He's going to get a tax refund, strategic byproduct, $3,736 that he didn't have before. Partner number two, she's making $30,000 a year. She's going to be able to put $5,400 away into an RSP, She gets $1,080. These people just have $4,816 that they never had before. Come out of nowhere. It's a strategic byproduct. And now they got a pretty substantial amount in their RSP. What, $18,000 practically. Now here's the cool part. That extra money they're going to use for the closing cost. They're going to get new appliances. They're going to pay the lawyer that does nothing $2,000 to do nothing. And they're going to pay the real estate agent. So that's something that a lot of people go in to do, and they forget they have those extra costs. So it gives them a little bit of a leeway. But here's the really cool thing. By putting it into that RSP, it's only going to take them 3 years to save for that down payment instead of 4. And they're going to have about 13 grand extra that they can use for the closing cost, the movers, doing a little bit of renovation. Jake, where are you? Poor kid's almost built the whole house over on his own. And the closing cost. What a benefit. We shorten it by a year, we got all that money extra that we never thought we had. So, but there's a difference though, also when I talk about savings to prosperity. You have to understand that there's a difference between savings and investing. So in my own experience, anything that you need in less than 5 years is savings. You should be very wary that you could put that into something that's a longer term investment and come up with a surprise after 5 years. Not a good surprise. You could also come up with a good surprise. But it's too short of a time frame to be fully invested in the market. So savings, less risky, very, very liquid. You can get your hands on it any time and not market driven. Investments, longer time frame, and buy. And I got to tell you, I just recently spent some time with Jerry Siegel. Do you know who he is? Wrote a book called Stocks for the Long Run. And this guy's a professor. And he said that he put stocks in his portfolio from the first day he bought because he knew he didn't need it until he retired. Now he's a multimillionaire and he does, I think he's at Harvard or something like that. So if you have something that, for example, is a car fund, it's more savings. If you have something for retirement or education for a child, that's more investing, okay? So, or a cottage. How many people here have a cottage? We used to have a cottage, I hated it. I'll tell you a little story. Our cottage was never fixed up properly. And after my father passed away, I decided to do some fixing up. So I put a whole new kitchen floor in, new kitchen cupboards, new plumbing. And my brother-in-law came up on Saturday after his work at the grocery store with a type of saw that I didn't own, so he could put the sink in. So I was busy doing all this hammering and everything in my house, and he puts the sink in and turns it on, and there's water all over the floor. He hand tightened the coupling on the bottom after all that work. All the cupboards were full of water, and it was that press board, ruined. Yeah, drove me nuts. But anyways, one of the ways that you're going to be able to have a financial plan is you have to know where you are. If you walked into a tourist, or it's a bad example because these kids won't remember that, but when I used to go with my wife over to the AAA club to plan a road trip, we didn't have GPS. We actually used to get maps. But if you didn't know what city you were starting with, you couldn't get anywhere in the world. Boy, am I getting old. Back when I was young, we had horses. Yeah, never mind. Okay. But anyways, if you don't know where you're going on your GPS, where you're starting from, you couldn't get there either, right? You have to know where your beginning is. So one of the challenges that we have with working with X and Y is they don't like following a process. And they certainly don't want to put any effort into it. It's really been difficult. It's like pulling teeth. So I'm actually working on something that's kind of a little bit different. And there's going to be a thing coming out where there's going to be a law where you're going to be in control of all your data, your digital data. This has happened in Europe, it's coming to Canada. And so what you're going to be able to do is say to your bank, here's my address, my digital address that you send my bank statements to, and my Visa card statements to. And oh, by the way, my employer, I want you to send my health benefits and my pension plan. And I got my own investments, so that's going to come in this way. And then when my accountant does my taxes, he's going to send it into another box. And when my lawyer does my will, it's going to go in another box. It's literally a cloud-based storage box, digital storage box. And so when you go into the financial planner, you'll be able to give him your code. He'll be able to access that. But on top of that, he can become like your mom. Don't laugh at my mom. Dorothy was very, very, how would I put this, set in her ways. And if something was coming due, you heard about it 364 days before the due date. And there was a countdown from then on. So what's going to happen is the financial planner will be able to keep this stuff up to date. And so when you're coming in for a review, he's going to pull that stuff off the internet, take a look at it. He's going to send you out electronic surveys so he can figure out what goals you got right now. And when you come in, it's going to be seeing, well, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I've reviewed all your stuff, and here's what we need to do. There will be no, where's your T4? Where's your, I do that now, and you guys look at me like I got 3 eyes. There'll be none of that anymore. It's going to be all done electronically. That's the cool part of the digital age. The bad part is, now we got to worry about security. And so they're actually encrypting beyond 128. They're actually tripling that for this stuff. It's going to be kind of neat. So that's coming up. I'm working on it. So, understanding that you need to gather up all this information to do a plan, having it done electronically is kind of cool, but right now it doesn't exist. So yeah, when I do a financial plan, I need all that information. I have to have the way to do the math. So I got to be able to understand it. So, but understanding what you have is really important, especially when I take a look at an employee's pension plan. And we sit down and we're doing a financial plan, and they say, well, I'm supposed to get a certain dollar amount at age 65, but I want to retire at 52 because I'll have my 30 years in. And when you explain to them that there's a penalty for leaving early, they look at you like, well, I didn't know that. And it's pretty sufficient too. I mean, it's going to cut your pension in half. Oh, never knew that. Or when you take a look at, recently I just took a look at a pension plan, and it's Hydro One. Hydro One is only 70% funded. Who would have thought that with all the money they're taking out of our pockets? So, in actual fact, they could cut that pension down by 30%. Because a pension is a guarantee that's a promise. It doesn't have to be followed. Take a look at the people that worked at Sears. They had a surprise. Stelco. They had surprises. So that can happen. It's just a promise, okay? So, all right. So you need to understand what you have. We help do that for you. We explain it back to you in English. And so that's important. And the other thing is you need to know about government benefits and pensions. And let's talk about that, because recently there's an article in the paper about that that's really got my blood boiling. So, and they call them government schemes. And that's a pretty appropriate word because I can explain how they work, and you're going to say to yourself, holy mackerel, these guys are making a ton of money off me. So, Canada pension, terrible pension. We're going to get into that in a minute. But old age security, that's even worse. So old age security is funded by the people that are working to pay for the people that aren't working. Okay? So I'm the baby boomer and I just went through. So there's a lot of people working. We're all retiring now. There's a problem. There's a lower amount of people working after the baby boomers until the next millennial boom takes effect. So with that gap, where's that money come from? It's pay as you go. There's not enough people paying. You can't go anywhere. And so it's not funded. And so the previous federal government realized that we had a problem, and they changed the date or the age that you could get it to 67. And they did that after they did a whole bunch of math and figured it out that that's what they needed to do. And all the laws, the tax code and everything was changed. Mike, you know how much paperwork we went through. And as soon as the new government came in, without thinking, they moved it back to 65. Now the funny part was, there was an article probably a month after they did that. And they admitted they're probably either going to discontinue old age security or make it 72. But they wanted just to change it back to 65 to spite the previous government. That kind of stuff is going to stop. We as Canadian citizens have to say to them, enough of this garbage. So, personally, and I'm 64, I don't plan on getting any money from old age security. So if you're younger than 64, you may want to listen to that. Now, let's talk about Canada Pension Plan. And Canada Pension Plan reminds me of the guys that we saw down in New York City with those three cups with the P underneath. Because I got to tell you, talk about schemes, this is a real big one for the government. So, Canada Pension Plan is funded. Every paycheck that you get, part of it has a CPP deduction, goes off. You don't have any control of that. The government takes that right off the bat, every paycheck. But what you don't, or maybe you do, or maybe you don't realize, your employer pays the same amount for you. So there's 200% is going into this fund for you. And they literally have it earmarked for you. You have your own fund. They can tell you what's in there. And you work, and you work. And the premium goes up, and the amount goes up, and you start making good money. But what they've done is they've done some kind of fun stuff. They got a thing called MAP. Basically, it's the maximum amount that they calculate for that year. And then they have an exemption amount that they take off of that. Why not just have one number, people? Oh no, we got to make it difficult. So now you got to deduct that number from that number, and you come up with the maximum amount that you can contribute towards. And it's just under 5% of that number is what comes out of your paycheck, and your employer matches it. So your maximum contributor earnings is what that comes out to, all that math. But they literally could make it one simple number. All right? $100. So if you're making that amount of money, you're at the maximum CPP amount. You have to take the basic exemption off of that, which is $3,500. Literally, that's the amount that you're allowed to make without having to pay CPP. So where that comes in is the kids that have the part-time jobs when they're younger. And then, so your maximum amount that you can put in for 2018 is $55,900 minus $3,500 equals, and you moved it up to $51,700. Okay, quit moving back and forth on me, dear. $52,400. Basically, you get to put away almost 5% each of you. Next slide. Which turns out to be $2,593. That's out of your pocket. And your employer gets to do the same thing for every employee that they have. That's a lot of money. It's like $6,000 a year. Now, what do they do with that money? They actually have a company that invests it. How many people have been to Shoppers Drug Mart? It's owned by your CPP premium. They invest it in Canadian companies. And they invest it with hardly any fees. There's no cost to it. they make about 7% per year. Wow, that's pretty good. So, they take your best 40 years and they base it on that. Now, if you don't work 40 years, you don't get the full maximum CPP. They take it off of it. And here's the worst part. If you died when you were young and you put into CPP, if you weren't a certain age and you died, they kept the money. They gave nothing to your spouse. Does that sound fair? And if both of you, say, contributed to CPP and you both died when you're 65, when your first check's coming in, they give you $2,500 apiece and they keep the rest. Great job, all right? Now, I started working full-time in 1977. Yes, I should be in a museum, right? Yeah, okay. Thanks. 1977, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, down at the Fasco. Now, the map was $9,300. My basic exemption was $900. I put in $151, and DeFasco had to match it. So what I'm trying to show you here is, over the years, they've increased the percentage, and they've increased the map, and they just keep on taking more and more and more. Okay? Now, I've actually calculated mine up, and like when I started, it was 1.8% of my paycheck, and now it's 4.95, and guess what? The current government says we want to take more because you're not saving enough for your retirement. But watch this. I've actually calculated what I'm going to get. In fact, I phoned up Benefits Canada to find out, and I'm going to get, out of my $104,489 that is sitting in my fund, they're going to give me nothing. Because, you know, when I calculate it out as a 5% rate of return, I should have $334,000 in there. Don't forget, I've got the ability to calculate each piece that went in. So I'm like, wait a second, why do I only have 104 when I should have 300 and some odd? And I just used 5%. And they're going to give me a pension, and let's say I live for 25 years after 65. They're going to give me a pension, you know, that's not that good. So I could take a pension of about $2,000 a month, and I would never run out of money all the way to age 90. But now we're going to show you what I'm going to get. And I'm going to get about a third of what I'm actually entitled to. I'm going to get $1,115. And I calculated out what the rate of return is. 0.01, sorry. CPP is crappy for Canadians. It's the worst pension as it stands today. They could do a lot of changes, but they don't want to. So here's what they want to do. There's more. They want to take 11.9% of your earnings in the future. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't sound like a good deal. So, and your employer is going to match it. They could literally give you $3,000 a month today without changing the premium, and you'd never run out of money. Instead, for every $1,000 they give you, they keep $2,000. Now they want to make it bigger. I think Canadians need to stand up to this and say, no way, keep your hands off my money. Now, they invested. Their actual rate of return after fees was 6.2%. That's over the last 10 years. That's not just 1 week. It's over the last 10 years. So, using that rate of return, again, my current book that I put in there, they should give me $3,000 a month. And I could have that for the rest of my life until I'm age 90, and I would never run out. I would never touch the principal. So when you die, actually, I'm surprised they don't have little Italian guys going out there and shooting us when we get to a certain age. Pay off the deficit quicker, I don't know. So remember, this federal government wants to improve the scheme to help you out. Stand up to them and say no. All right. Now, for those that know me, know that I had a brother that passed away at a very early age. Now, when I say an early age, I'm now 64. 47 was an early age. And I got to see what not having a plan B can do to a family. And so I made it my job for each and every one of you to have life insurance. I thought that was important. Now, my brother Brian was kind of a great guy. I loved him. I mean, he was a laugh. He was the only guy that I knew that could get away buying me toys at Christmas and my birthday that either I could kill myself or blow the house up with. I can remember him helping me with a chemistry set. They don't even sell chemistry sets for kids anymore. We literally had an explosion in my father's workroom that lifted his bench 4 feet off the table, like off the floor. It was cool. And all the windows in the basement busted out. It's kind of neat. So, unfortunately, he died at 47 and he left a mess. So insurance to me it's plan B. But there's other things too. Wills. 50% of Canadians don't have a will or a valid will. Now I review wills. And a couple of years ago, I was reviewing a will for some clients that I had for years. I mean, I've known these people for a long time. And they finally brought their will in for me to review because they just had seen my book. So the will looked perfect, unless you knew what the problem was. So it made their son and their daughter their executors and their beneficiaries. The will was written in 1992. The daughter was 3, the son was 5. The lawyer never bothered to ask how old they were. That was not a valid will. I have seen so many wills that are done improperly. I would suggest that you go and get a will and have it reviewed by somebody that knows what they're doing. And the other thing is power of attorneys. Power of attorneys help somebody make decisions for you, whether it be healthcare or financial, if you're sick or disabled. We don't have a choice when that happens in our life. You can be walking down the street and get hit by a car. Someone's got to pay your hydro bill. That's what a power of attorney does. Go and get them. They're very important. Life insurance. I got to tell you, life insurance in its purest form is a cool financial tool. Somebody's betting that you're going to die and you're betting you're going to live. That's what it is. And you pay money. And surprisingly or not, if you do the math on a pure life insurance policy, it's actually a good deal. Now, some people overinsure their wives. That could be an incentive. I don't know. But no, life insurance is very important. And I have to tell you, there's been several times when I've delivered checks at that time when things are really tough, and people thank me. And I feel I've done my job, even though it's not a happy situation. That's what Plan B is about. It's when the wheels fall off, that brown stuff hits the fan, that's when you need a Plan B. And even though you don't want to do it, it's important to have. All right? Disability insurance. Man, there's another one. Some people I've actually had in my practice that have been disabled more than once. Like, don't walk down the street or touch a crack or see a black cat, man. Something's going to happen to you. But people don't realize how important that is because it only pays 66 2/3 of your salary or your wages. Even if you have disability insurance, you're in trouble. You're on emergency mode. You've got to cut out 30% of your expenses to survive. And so the Plan B also has an emergency cash flow in it. I urge you, always have a Plan B. Millennials, oh, it can't happen to me. I'm too young. Guess what? It can, okay? So have the plan. Get used to it. Keep it up to date. So that is my presentation at this point. Thank you very much.